Hello everyone. So in this example of automation, I would like to discuss about a use case I faced with a Radioss model. So let me present quickly the model. This is a cell phone, quite old, I'm looking at, which is in the screen, falling on the floor. So this is basically a drop test. And what we would like to capture is the contact forces as an output. And if we look at the output blocks, we already have the output for this contact. But the point is, if we look into details into what are the generic contacts in Radioss, and this is somehow a frequent use case now, or a frequent strategy. For explicit solvers, you have one single contact for which take into account part A versus part B contact, and also auto contact for every part of the smartphone, of this phone, and one which is only for the external part of the phone versus the plane. So what if we want to extract the forces part versus part for every single part of the model? So for this, what we could use as an entity is to so let me come back to groups again to filter, and let me create what we called a sub-interface. So a sub-interface will be a sub-selection of entity, and we will be able to ask for a time history for an output on this one. So first step is asking for the sub-interface. So let's say, let's call it comp1, comp2. For instance, let's go here into this section. Let's say components. Let's go for 1 and 2, for instance. No, I don't want them by ID here. So I want the PCB and the battery. Okay, I will hit an I for isolate. And then in this comp1 and comp2, I have to define a surface ID and a GR node ID. So here, let me right click, created this surf ID. I want this to be a surfexed because I'm dealing with solid elements. And let's say I will pick component 1. So let's say it was this component. So let me pick this one, validate, close, and I want also to edit my GR node ID, created it so that it's based on components, and I want to select this component. Validate, close. And what I could do to complete, I didn't do it, but I could do it, is to, let's keep it for later, the time history creation. Let's focus first on the sub. So here's my sub contact. How does it look like if I take my command.tcl? Edit command file. Let me have a look at it. So we have this line, and it starts with updated. So here we have the surf text. So you have to catch some keywords or look at the start node history state. So here you see create state and assign to surf ID. And here we are renaming. So this is where we have created the first entity. So this is our original line. So let me paste it, and let me try to clean it a little bit. So first, the start node history state and end node history state are some milestone you can follow to identify what is occurring to your entity. So here you see we're creating the sub-interface. So we are creating a groups with config equal to type 72. You can look in the help for this, and we assign it the card image with the star set value command. First step, you can pick any argument that is applied to this group with the star set value and directly bring it in the create entity. So doing so, we can remove these lines. Then we're renaming it. So let's just pick comp1, comp2. It's curly brace that I used. I prefer to use the double quotes. So here it is. I can get rid of it. In my macro, I don't need to isolate the component. I just did it on purpose for the demonstration, interactive demonstration. So let's get rid of it. Now I create a set and I assign it to the as a primary set to the group. So I need this command, and again I need these two commands. Sorry, Control X. Let me put it at the bottom, at the top. So I'm create the set with the card image surf and the name T3, and then this I assign to the groups which was previously created, the sets with as a main entity set. I can remove everything else because they are leave as empty, so it does not change a lot of things. Here we are changing the card image to surf X, so basically what I can do is just bring it there. And last step is that we assign to this set IDs and we assign the ID component 1. So let me put there. And we are doing the same for set number 2. We assign it to the group. So I can get rid of everything of it until when I select the component. And this, again, I can pick this and assign it to my entity directly. And here I get only 5 lines. So this is the really first step, cleaning the command.tcl and keeping only the mandatory. Now let's think about automation and how we need to adjust this script. Step 1, we have these groups which is called by its ID. So either we extract the ID information from the group, or we replace the identification of the group here. We replace the ID identification by the name identification. Same for this one. Step 2, how do we point to the set ID here? We need to get the set ID. For this, we will define a new variable, which is set1 ID, let's call it. And we'll use the hm get value statement. Sets. I want to identify it with its name, equal set3 for this case. And I want to get it the data name, which is its ID. And so I can point here to $set1 ID. Same for this one. I want set2 ID with set4, which is the name there, and here I want $set2 ID. So now we have organized a little bit better. There are still some steps to be achieved in order to have this macro robust. So I won't detail all of them. I will just switch the tab and to go to the completer. Let me, before jumping to the previous tab where I have my complete macro here. Here we are dealing with only two components, component 1 and component 2. So basically what we will need to do is create mark panel comps1 select components in order to let the user select the components he wants to create subcontacts for. And from this we will collect a list which is set complete hm get mark comps 1. So the 1 here, it's the ID of the mark of components, and this is the one we retrieve it. And then we will have to loop over the components so that we look component 1 and component 2, component 2 and component 1 and component 3, component 2 and component 3, but we don't want component 2 and component 1 because we already saw them. So we want, let's say we have 3 components, we want 1 and 2, and we don't want 1 and 1, we want 1 and 3, and we want 2 and 3, and that's all. Plus, an extra check is that we need to make sure that when the user selected components, he only selected components with 2D and 3D elements. If he selected components with 1D elements, it will fail. So now let me jump back to this detailed macro. So to start with, I kept the 2 lines, which is create mark panel comps, so for interactive selection, and store this list of components into this selection of component into a list. Then I have a second user input, which is a floating value, which is a tolerance value. Why do I ask for this tolerance value? It's pretty simple. Let's take these 2 components, isolate them. It's pretty obvious that there will be no contact at all between both, so there is no need to create a sub-contact between both. So I want to check the distance between the components, and if it is larger than the tolerance, then there is no sub-contact created. Now, before going for this, I defined a test loop just to make sure that there is no component selected by the user which is with 1D or 0D elements. So for doing this, I select a first markup element with ID 1 by comp. So I select the elements by the component 1, then component 2, etc., etc. And I define a second markup elements with ID 2 by config, 103, 104, 208, etc., etc. What does this config corresponds to? So let me go to my online help. I search for create mark, for instance. And let's have a look at the left-hand side here. If I scroll up, here we're in the scripts, hypermesh script section. And what is important for the config is to look at the data names. And I want to go to the elements. And let's say, for instance, that I want to look at quad 4. You will see, so data name are the attributes in hypermesh, the attributes of an entity, which you can find interactively from the matrix browser, for instance. And here, if you look at the documentation, 104 stands for quad 4. 103 will be for tria3. It is, and if I show you exa8, it's pretty obvious. It should be pretty obvious that exa8 should be 208. And if I go to tetra, for instance, the tetra4 will be 204 and tetra10 will be 210. So in one end, I'm selecting all the elements belonging to the components. In the other end, I'm selecting all the 2D and 3D elements, which I'm expecting to face in Radioss. Then I look at the intersection between these 2 selections. And if there is no element in this intersection, I remove the component from the component list. So this is my check. Now, let's go for the definition of the subcontact. First, I need to iterate and to loop component 1 versus component 2 for all components. So what's the best strategy to do it? We could use, or we cannot use nested includes. So nested include is for each component 1 $component list, opening to for each component 2 $component list, because if we do so, what we will see is that we are looking to component 1 versus component 1, which has no sense, component 1 versus component 2, component 1 versus component 3, etc. And then we'll have component 2 versus component 1, which already have been defined, component 2 versus component 2, so no meaning at all. So let's go back here. What I did to avoid this is I'm dealing with a while loop, and I'm checking the length of component list. And at each iteration, what I say is that I define as component 1 the first element of the list, and then I remove from the list this first element by using the lrange $component list. I start from index 1 and not index 0 anymore, so I remove component 1. And then, taking this component 1, I will loop over all the other components called component 2 available in component list. Step 1, what I'm doing is taking the nodes in the component 1, taking the nodes in component 2, storing it in 2 different marks, and using this HM measure shortest distance here to measure the distance between both mark of nodes. We cannot use this measure shortest distance by component. It should be elements or not. So here I pick nodes and I compare if it is lower than tolerance. If it is, then I can create the set. So here I have this star create entity sets card image of X with the ID pointing to comp1 and with the name. And as my component 1 may be in contact with different other components, I don't want to recreate a new set every time I change of component 2. So what I did is, if this set is not existing the first time, then I create it. Otherwise, what I will just do is store into this variable set1id the ID of the set which is named set1 comp1. I do the same for the sets2, so I create it the first time, and then if it exists, I will just call it with the HMGet value. I will retrieve its ID with the HMGet value. And then to complete, I just create the entity groups with card image sub and calling my main entity's ID with my set1 ID, and secondary entity set2 ID. And then I can close my different curly brace and the macro is done. Just for the sake of the demonstration, let me go to the model. So, okay, let me delete it and let me go to view, TCL console. I will clear everything, Control V. So select my components. Sorry, I forgot to select all my, to show again. So I hit A to show again all my components. You see that hitting A, I did not show again the floor because I locked the view once the plane is hidden, so that if I show all again, I don't want the plane to be exposed for this demonstration. So let me validate it. I need to define a tolerance, 0.2. Okay. And there we go. You see that the subcontacts are being populated. And same for the sets. So it should be pretty fast. There should be something like 50 contacts being created. Yeah, 60, and there it is. There it is done. That all the contacts have been created. Okay, so now let's conclude this video with the creation of the output block. So again, let's start with interactive approach. So I want to create an output block, which will be my time history. So my output, my sub contacts, and I want this to be groups and time history, yes, and I want to select my groups. I will interactively select all the ones starting with subit star. Apply, validate, and I want one variable which is def, close. Edit, command file. So I need to scroll up until my subcontacts. So this is the lines. Control X that I need to sorry, I copy pasted them before, but create entity. So again, same work, trying to reduce the lines. Group 0, nothing, group 0, nothing. So here we have some attributes that are sets. So I will keep them, sorry, I duplicated name equal as it. So I will just replace the ID3 by name because of the status equal to. For such case, I haven't tested yet to combine them. So, same here, Control V. And here we have the line of interest, which is defining our groups, and we still have this command. So for this group, what we can do is star create mark groups, and I will one by card image name sub set group list sub list hm get mark groups 1, and here what I will be able to do is to pick this one, Control X, put it there, Control V, groups dollar sublist, and there is just one remaining line, which is this one, and again I need to replace the ID identification by the name identification, and there it is. So let me pick these few lines, go to HyperWorks, let me clean this, let me delete my subcontact first, delete, let me hit again this one. So my subcontact has been recreated and it contains all my groups. So now what basically I just need to do is pick this one and integrate it within my scripts, and then my script is done. So I hope this video helps you having some ideas regarding how to use hypermesh automation. See you later for another video. Goodbye everyone.